Before we begin, I want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional unceded territory of Mississauga, Port Credit, First Nation, and the Anishinaabe, Chippewa, and Haudenosaunee Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that this is unceded territory, and we acknowledge it with gratitude. Yesterday, of course, was Orange Shirt Day. It takes a lot to get the leader of the Green Party into an orange shirt during the writ period. But I was in it because this is a large part of our platform is the ongoing imperative of justice and reconciliation. Je suis vraiment heureuse d'être ici aujourd'hui parmi les candidats du Parti vert pour la région de Toronto et quelqu'un d'autre à notre autre endroit en Ontario et aussi de Québec. Nous avons aujourd'hui une annonce, c'est la même politique que nous avons présentée dans les élections 2015, mais nous avons amélioré notre plateforme sur la question de l'éducation post-secondaire. Avant le moment que je vais commencer, je vais présenter les candidats ici avec moi. Before going into the announcement, I want to introduce the wonderful candidates who are with me at this announcement. To my left, Annemie Paul from Toronto Centre. She is also the Shadow Cabinet Critic on International Relations, given her quite awe-inspiring background, honestly, just amazed by it. Marty Lancaster came down from Barrie, Springwater, Oro, Medonte, just give a little wave. Rebecca Wood from York Centre. Randy Roundine from Scarborough Agincourt. Nikki Ward, York Southwestern. Nikki? Where did you, Nikki? There you are, okay. Travis Mason from St. Catharines. And Jalen Bourgère, qui est présente maintenant à Rivière-des-Mille de Lille. She's also a student here at University of Toronto. Nick Capra, Parkdale High Park. And Tim Grant, right here. Tim Grant at University of Rosedale is also on Shadow Cabinet and is a critic and advocate for municipal affairs. And Tara McMahon from Scarborough Guildwood. Excellent. So, welcome. So, yes. I want to say how proud I am of all 338 Green Party candidates. We filled out the slate yesterday, filed, done, everybody on board at 338 candidates in 338 ridings. I'm also very proud of our platform. It's the most comprehensive. It's the most forward-looking of any of the parties' platforms in this country. Now, some of the parties haven't launched their platforms. We've launched our full platform, our full budget, and we are proud of our work. Now, today's announcement goes to, and of course we're grateful for being hosted here at Ryerson. Canadian post-secondary education is in trouble. The first person to point this out to me, and it wasn't personal conversation, but was in reading Jane Jacobs' book, Dark Age Ahead. I commend it to people. Don't need to tell this audience about Jane Jacobs and her contribution to this country. Her death was a major loss. But what Jane Jacobs said in Dark Age Ahead was that there were many pillars of our society under assault, and education, she believed, was being converted from education to certification. Pay your money, get your ticket. As opposed to an enriched experience in which any student can expand their mind, expand their experience, begin to see that they might have an interest that they never knew existed. Contact with professors makes a difference. Having an opportunity to have an enriched experience makes a difference. And emerging from that enriched experience without a crushing level of debt is something essential for every Canadian student, whether a mature student going back for a PhD in your 80s or a young person branching out for the first time. The Green Party is very clear on this. Education at the post-secondary level, like from kindergarten to 12, should be free. We can do it, we can afford it, many other countries have. Un gouvernement de Parti vert rende une éducation post-secondaire gratuite pour tous. Et en même temps, c'est absolument essentiel d'augmenter le financement des institutions. Pour le Parti vert, on doit réinvestira dans les institutions postsecondaires avec 10 milliards de dollars pour aider nos institutions. So we can't just cut tuition and say that's the end of tuition without investing in the institutions. So we have budgeted $10 billion that will be coming through federal provincial transfers with agreements with each province that this money is tied and that we want to reward those institutions that are the most inclusive, offer the best new opening tenure track positions. Because one of the things we've seen is that one of the most exploited group of workers in this country are recent PhDs who get paid as lecturers, maybe $6,000 a course seems to be the run-of-the-mill payment. So you emerge from your post-secondary educational experience, you've got your new PhD, you have crushing debt, and you could make more money at Starbucks. Yes. There's something very wrong with this picture. It's clearly not sustainable. We want to support the administrations of universities and colleges, whether for trade certification in a Red Seal profession or because you're studying medieval history or Russian literature. Our society needs to keep our brains functioning, intact, expanding, and education doesn't stop at the end of high school. It doesn't even stop at the end of your post-secondary education. It's a process of lifelong learning. Je suis vraiment fière de présenter notre plateforme pour protéger l'excellence dans notre monde d'éducation, enseignement post-secondaire et aussi pour les institutions pour formation, pour les autres formations professionnelles de qualité. C'est un droit et aussi, ce n'est pas seulement un privilège, c'est un droit. Et le Parti vert, c'est maintenant le plus progressif de tous les partis au Canada. Et nous sommes disponibles pour les questions en anglais ou en français. We're really happy to answer any of your questions about how we take this bold step forward, how we pay for it, and why Canada should join the legion of countries around the world, Norway, France, Germany, where people can go to university. By the way, even Canadians can go to university for free in countries in Europe when they can't go to university for free at home. Something wrong with this picture, and let's get out ahead of it and fix it. Thank you very much. So, another candidate has entered the room. Hannah Conover Arthurs is in the house. Come on up, candidate for Davenport. Before you leave, Hannah, I have some sign requests for lawns for you, but I just don't want to forget. Okay, any questions from any of the journalists in the room? We can only take questions from authorized, accredited journalists. Anybody have a question? We're hoping. Yes. Our revenue numbers add up to sufficient new sources of revenue. There are some places, of course, that we save money. Canceling the Trans Mountain Pipeline saves money. Ending fossil fuel subsidies saves us billions of dollars a year. This is about a $16 billion ticket item in canceling tuitions, plus putting $10 billion into the investment so that universities and colleges can continue to be flourishing, keep the lights on, and not be feeling so pinched for every penny. We pay for it with a number of new streams of revenue. We do not increase taxes for average wage-earning Canadians. We do create a wealth tax for those on their wealth if they have more than $20 million in wealth. I'm looking at this room, I think we're all okay. But we also will be creating a tax regime on those businesses that make a lot of money in Canada and currently pay almost no taxes. So the e-commerce companies, whether it's Google or Facebook or Amazon, et cetera. We also have created a financial transaction tax The Parliament of Canada actually voted for a financial transaction tax, also known as the Tobin tax, a couple decades ago. It never did come about. It's a 0.5% tax on transactions, but only on the larger ones, not every time you go to the bank to change money before you go on a holiday. That won't be touched. But 0.5% on really large transactions is a very sensible policy, which we hope to continue to press to be a global tax, as Nobel Prize-winning economist James Tobin first proposed. We're also looking at a tax on sugary drinks to improve our children's health. This is an ask that has come to us over and over again from the Canadian Diabetes Association, for the Heart and Stroke Foundation, and so on. So as you go through the list of our new revenue sources, closing stock option loopholes, closing capital gain loopholes, going after the money that's hidden in offshore bank accounts. You know, Canada was the only country where nationals were revealed in the Panama Papers to be hiding money offshore. We're the only country who knew about that and hasn't since gone after the money. We really need to reform the Canadian Revenue Agency, and as had been recommended over and over again by Auditor Generals going back to Sheila Fraser, right up through the late Michael Ferguson, that looked at the way CRA operates and has empirical evidence that proves what all of us know intuitively. They like going after people who pay very little tax and have very little money. They don't like going after people who have billions and are hiding it, because those are the kind of people who can hire lawyers. So we have a package of new revenue measures. I haven't listed all of them, but they are sufficient to allow major improvements in our social safety net: universal child care, free tuition, pharmacare, and do it in a way that, barring an unexpected event like a global recession, we're not dogmatic or ideological about it, but all things being equal as we now stand here, we can balance the budget within 5 years and eliminate deficits. So that's where we stand as a party. We are fiscally responsible, but we're socially progressive, and we do not believe that you balance a budget through cuts. That is the wrong way to go. This country has had far too many cuts in this province, far too many cuts in the things that really matter. We can, at the federal level, help make up some of what's been cut at the provincial level, investing in mental health, investing in addiction counseling and aid right across the board to those parts of our society that we can see are fraying at the edges. Yes? It's a great question. The people who currently have student loans, we want to reduce the existing student loans. I should have mentioned that. I appreciate the question, Nicole. We will be, over time, ensuring that those who are carrying existing loans that are loans through the federal government will have their loans reduced to no more than $10,000 outstanding. So we will get rid of existing student loans as we go forward to ensure that they aren't impacted in the future. Our first spending is a $10 billion to post-secondary education in a one-time support, but we obviously need to pay attention to it and make sure that our post-secondary education can support itself and is sustainable long-term. Okay. Even if Andrew Shearer was a licensed broker before he was elected to Parliament, his pre-politics resume is so thin it hardly bears examining. Now, the thing that's important to determine is how much of what he said was deliberately misleading. I saw him on television trying to explain that he wasn't a licensed broker, but he had this arrangement and he was allowed to do trades. An official investigation seems to me to be overkill. He clearly exaggerated his credentials, but he got elected when he was 24 years old. I am very pleased with my record. I didn't join a political party till I was 52. I have a deep degree of, distrust is too harsh a word. I think that people in public life should have a world experience and a life experience that makes them valuable in Parliament. Now, I want Jaylin elected. She is about to turn 20. I would recommend that when she's been in Parliament with us 2 terms, you leave and go get some other experience in life. Career politicians are not healthy in our democracy. Stephen Harper had he'd never been hired by anyone except on one summer job for one internship for Imperial Oil. The only other job he had was as the spokesperson for the National Citizens Coalition, which was another brand of conservative politics. People who are lifers in politics don't understand the day-to-day struggle of Canadians. And that's where I think it's disappointing that Andrew Shearer exaggerated his very thin credentials. I think it shows him in a fairly hypocritical light to take pot shots at the Prime Minister for, quote unquote, only being a teacher. Frankly, Stephen Harper had less credentials than Andrew Shearer's credentials, which Andrew Shearer has now been shown to have exaggerated. But I don't think we need an inquiry into it. It's pretty clear on its face that Andrew Shearer has no life experience except being elected. And I also believe quite profoundly, and I'm distressed that it hasn't been noticed, Andrew Shearer used the position of Speaker of the House of Commons as a stepping stone to advance his political career, which breaks with every parliamentary tradition of every Commonwealth country, not just Canada. When you are Speaker of the House, you have to be, forgive the expression, politically neutered. You can't sit there as an MP and think the job of the Speaker is to protect the rights of every MP. Every MP. And you have no appeal. There's no appeal for a parliamentarian who puts forward an order. I put forward many points of order, some 20 and 30-page legal arguments to Andrew Shearer. I had to suspend disbelief every time and hope that the ruling from the Speaker was fair. I had to believe it was, or the whole system of parliamentary democracy falls apart. And it was quite wrong of Andrew to be Speaker of the House and then go back into partisan politics at all. But it's now quite clear that he used the office of Speaker and even held meetings at the Speaker's residence to start planning his bid for Conservative Party leadership. This is an aspect of what he did as a parliamentarian that hasn't received much examination, but I think he's done permanent damage to the respect of the office of Speaker. Because now who's to say that Jeff Regan doesn't leave being Speaker of the House and run for Liberal leadership someday? Now, I don't think Jeff Regan will do that, being clear. But it damages our institutions. The Speaker of the House, we go back to Louis Lamoureux in the 60s, left his party and ran as an independent every time after he became Speaker. This is something that goes, it's long-standing tradition. But every time we lose a bit of long-standing tradition in parliamentary democracy, our democracy is eroded. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I'm just looking for journalists first. Sorry, sir. All right, no, I'm just journalists. Oh, you are? I'm sorry. Yes? Okay, absolutely. Okay.
I assume that you will be splitting the vote with the NDP. Would you agree to an electoral pact with strategic constituency so that you don't...
That violate, actually, your idea...
The question is, in Europe, cars have cost twice to 3 times what gasoline and diesel over the last 70 years. Why do you think a carbon tax of 10 or 20 or 30 cents a litre would make any difference? There are many cars in Dublin,
Yes,
Paris,
so, representative from the Irish Times, let me approach your question. First of all, to say Greens, what's that?
Irish Examiner.
Irish Examiner, sorry. Let me first say, Greens don't split the vote. We grow the vote. Yeah. When I was elected in 2011, Saanich Gulf Islands had the highest voter turnout in the country, except for one riding in Prince Edward Island, 75% voter turnout. So people decided they had something to vote for. And this notion that one party owns the vote they got a previous year and somehow someone comes along and convinces them you have a better platform, a better policy, We actually inspire people to vote. So when I was elected, as I said, highest voter turnout at 75%. When Andrew Weaver was elected in Oak Bay Gordon Head, the leader of the Green Party of British Columbia now, he wasn't when he was first elected, highest voter turnout in BC. I mean, I'm not saying this as a matter of rhetoric or slogan. We grow the vote. We give people a reason to turn out and vote when they previously have stayed home. And in 2011, when Stephen Harper formed a false majority government, that government had fewer votes than the people who stayed home. We could have had a majority government called the We Stayed Home Party, but we have to inspire people to vote. And the second part, in answer to the question, is that it currently violates the Elections Act to do what you propose. The third thing is that there's nothing in the NDP program that convinces me that they will do much more than the inadequate policies of the Liberals when it comes to the climate crisis, which is the #1 issue we are facing. So we are looking very much at what looks to be a minority parliament coming up in this election. I mean, we're 3 weeks away from the vote. Anything could change, but as things now stand, the divisions in the polls have stayed more or less stable, looking at neither of the big parties, the Liberals or the Conservatives, having sufficient numbers of votes to elect sufficient numbers of members of Parliament to get a false majority again. The biggest disaster for this country would be if either the Liberals or the Conservatives were able to put together a false majority again, because we know that when a government has 100% of the power, they are arrogant, they forget their promises, and regardless of where they are on the spectrum, we don't get good government. So we're urging voters back to growing the vote. People who sat it out last time, people who are disgusted with ethical scandals, people who don't want to see the boardrooms of big oil or big pharma or SNC-Lavalin making decisions for our government. We need to make sure that as many Greens as possible are elected, because we are in our DNA programmed to cooperate, to work across party lines, and we're very committed to ensuring that in the next Parliament, we have a Parliament that functions well, that delivers on climate action, that continues to ensure that we make sure that, this may sound familiar, this may have a familiar ring to you, but this time, 2019 will be the last election held under first past the post. We should focus on the goals that we have as Greens to make life better for every Canadian, and particularly for our kids and grandkids. So we're happy to work with absolutely all the parties. There'll be six parties electing MPs going to Parliament this election. That's why people should feel free and safe and ignore the fear-based messages that you are bound to get, that somehow voting Green helps some other party. Voting Green helps you. That's what you want to do. Est-ce qu'il y a les autres questions en anglais ou en français? Anybody have any other questions, particularly from those? Thank you for the journalists, the camera people, and everyone who showed up today for this announcement. We are very committed to making sure that our kids have top quality education. Education is what keeps a country and a democracy safe from bullies and demagogues. Education is key to a healthy society, and we should not put barriers in the way of anyone getting the education they seek, whether it's to get your red seal carpenter, electrician, plumbers. We need every single worker we can get in a green economy, and we need to make space to say it matters to pursue what you find makes your brain thrive. It matters to have poets. It matters to have astrophysicists. It matters to have as many smart people as possible, as the population of Canada continues to be one that is not susceptible to that populist movement that has succeeded, particularly, I think, in the US, where they deliberately dumped down education and the media. We have to hang on to being thoughtful, critical thinkers who are ready to stand up and fight for what's right, because that's what Greens will always do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.